Joining me now to discuss the deadly shooting outside the White House is retired police lieutenant and founder of the Wounded Blue, Randy Sutton. Thank you so much for being here, Randy. As a former officer with 34 years in the field, what's your reaction to Saturday's shooting outside the White House?
Well, it highlighted the effectiveness of the security arrangements around the White House. Clearly the security around the White House in Washington D.C. has been stepped up dramatically over the last year. We've seen National Guard troops being deployed. We have a beefed up security in the area around the White House, and this revealed that the security protocols were effective and worked. This individual engaged Secret Service personnel. He had attacked with a firearm and he was neutralized within seconds. That is exactly what you are looking for when you're facing a situation like this, where a critical incident takes place. Law enforcement was effective, they returned fire effectively, and they neutralized the suspect.
So you're not concerned with how far he got? This happened exactly as it was supposed to.
No, I'm not concerned with that at all. They have checkpoints all over Washington D.C. in close proximity to many of the Capitol buildings, and besides Secret Service, you have a huge contingent of Capitol Police. You have Washington Metro PD. You have a major law enforcement presence in and around the Capitol, and we don't want an armed camp. We don't want to have people scared of seeing uniformed armed officers. But on the other hand, we have seen an uptick in violence, and they have to be effective.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we don't want the people feeling like we're in a police state or, a place like Cuba. Now, this shooter was known to law enforcement and was arrested last summer for entering a restricted White House area. Could this event have been prevented?
That's a great question. So you look at the record of this individual. He had criminal history. He had a criminal history of violent crime, but he also showed a propensity for trying to get into the White House. So, excuse me. So, was he on a watch list? Yes, you can guarantee he was. But there was also a warrant for his arrest, and that warrant was for failure to appear. And unfortunately, what we have seen is an ineffectiveness of the criminal justice system in Washington, D.C. We have seen a lack of consequences for criminal activity. You have seen the wildings that have been taking place, the takeovers of areas of Washington D.C. by juveniles and young adults who are not fearful of law enforcement. They're not fearful of the consequences. Why is that? Well, because there's been a breakdown in the criminal justice system in Washington D.C. because of the liberal left who are in control of the city council in Washington. And they refuse to give law enforcement the ability to be effective. They are doing everything they can to put roadblocks in the way of law enforcement's effectiveness.
Now, Randy, we're still not clear 100%. Law enforcement hasn't clarified the intentions behind this shooter, but describe what's happening right now behind the scenes during this investigation to get clear about those intentions.
Sure thing. So this individual had a criminal history. They knew him. They definitely had a file on him from his previous encounters. So he's not an unknown individual. Now, when you have an attack like this, the first thing that law enforcement is looking at, the FBI especially, because they would have the responsibility of the investigation, is there a bigger a bigger threat at play here? Is this individual part of a cell? Was he in conspiracy with others to commit this act? I think from everything that we have heard and seen from about this individual is they're looking at this as a mentally ill, criminal who has demonstrated violent propensities in the past, and that he was a lone wolf, if you will. It may actually be a more that description may be a little too generous for him. He's a mentally ill individual who somehow found a gun. Because and this demonstrates that you can create all the laws, the anti-gun laws that you want. This individual was not allowed to have a firearm, and yet somehow he did it. Did he buy it legally? No. And so this demonstrates that you can create laws, and many of the individuals on the left love to create more and more gun laws. They want to ban guns, ban certain firearms, but that isn't effective. In order to be effective, you have to put people in prison for their crimes. That's what works. And somehow that seems to be not even discussed when it comes down to the criminal justice system in many, many places, including Washington, D.C.
Randy, I want to turn to the president and the attacks on his life. Obviously, he was in the White House when this incident happened. There have been multiple shooters targeting him, shot in the ear, of course, before Election Day in 24. Talk about the threat level he faces at this time.
I don't think there's been a president that has faced more threat than this president in history. Maybe Abraham Lincoln, but I don't think anybody else has ever faced the kind of threat that President Trump has. And the unfortunate reality is that much of this, I think, have been prevented if we didn't have some of the absolutely unhinged, violent rhetoric when it comes down to this president. I mean, the reality is that Trump derangement syndrome is real. We have seen people that you would think have a modicum of intelligence that would appear because they're successful in their lives, that they are somewhat intelligent and have common sense, and yet when it comes down to their feelings for this president, it is absolutely unhinged. And the violent rhetoric that we have heard from many of the political leadership on the left is unconscionable. They are ginning up the hate. And when you have mentally ill people like this individual who is pliable because of their mental illness, they absorb this hatred, they absorb this rhetoric, and can somehow justify to themselves violent behavior. And I really think that one thing that America is lacking these days is a belief in the social contract. You have rights as a citizen, but you also have responsibilities. And calling for the violent death of a president of the United States, that's way out of line, and yet we're seeing it more and more and accepted. And that's the part that really sickens me.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're talking about an increased need for civics education. So we know there's heightened security around President Trump given recent events. What do you think the solution to these shootings should be?
Well, I wish I could tell you that there is a solution, but these threats are going to continue. This president is the least safe president in recent history. Um, his family is at risk. He is at risk, and even when he's out of office, he will be at risk. Um, I have a great deal of respect for President Trump. I admire him. I admire his courage to place himself literally in the crosshairs, as he has done over and over again. I think it shows his love of this country and his patriotism.
All right, retired Police Lieutenant Randy Sutton, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you.